Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes dense info and, well, we try to pull out the most important, surprising, and honestly, just fascinating bits for you.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And today we're diving into a world that's maybe way bigger and more surprising than you think. It's the world that helps explain why we do what we do, feel what we feel, think what we think.
Exactly. Today's journey is all about the core ideas of psychology. We're using an Introduction to Psychology textbook as our guide,
Right.
our mission. Uncover those key concepts, definitely debunk some common myths, and really show how psychological science is relevant to you, like in everyday life.
Okay, let's start there. What is psychology, really? I mean, beyond the pop culture stuff, the word itself is a clue, isn't it? It goes way back.
It really does. Psychology comes from ancient Greek. You've got psyche, which meant mind, but also, interestingly, breath or soul.
Breath, like literal breathing.
Yeah. And then oxology, meaning the study of, so the study of the breath or mind. It reflects this ancient Greek idea that life itself, your soul or mind, was somehow tied to your breath. You inhale it, you exhale it.
Huh, that's quite an image. And it bumps right up against that classic philosophical question, doesn't it? The mind-body problem.
Totally. Are your thoughts, your consciousness, separate from your physical brain? Or are they just what the brain does?
Descartes famously said they were separate, right?
Dualism.
He did. René Descartes, way back in the 17th century. Mind and body distinct, but interacting somehow. Now, modern neuroscience mostly leans towards materialism, the idea that mind is an emergent property of brain processes.
But the tension is still there.
Oh yeah, it definitely persists. Even in modern research, I remember for my own dissertation on social behavior, I actually had to include a whole chapter on the neuroscience of loneliness.
Really? Even though you were focused on the social side. Right. My focus was much more sociocultural.
Yeah.
But it shows how we're still, grappling with bridging that gap between the abstract mind and the physical brain.
Yeah.
It's still a live question.
Fascinating. Okay, so setting aside the deep philosophy for just a second, how does modern science define psychology?
The straightforward scientific definition is this. Psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes.
And that word scientific is doing a lot of work there.
Absolutely critical. It's why psychology isn't just like intuition or someone's pet theory. It means we use rigorous empirical methods, things you can replicate.
Right.
That's why you can trust things like evidence-based therapies. It separates psychology from, all the pseudoscience out there.
And behavior and mental processes.
Behavior is anything we can observe, talking, body language, how fast someone reacts to something. Mental processes are the internal stuff, memory, emotions, thoughts. We study those often through things like self-reports or brain imaging.
Okay, so psychology has this kind of dual identity then. It's a science, very rigorous, but it's also a helping profession. How does that work together?
It's actually a really powerful combination. As a science, it uses experiments, data analysis, all that, to figure out the fundamentals of how we take attention, memory, emotion, decision-making.
The basic research.
Exactly. But then it's also an applied field focused on improving well-being.
Yeah.
Clinical psychologists use that research for therapy, helping with disorders, stress, trauma.
Sure, therapy is what most people think of.
Right, but it's broader.
Yeah.
Psychologists work in schools, businesses, that's industrial, organizational, or IO,
Right.
psychology, sports,
Yeah.
government, applying psychological principles everywhere. So it's both understanding and application.
Yeah, much broader than just the therapy couch.
Yeah.
So these four core goals of psychology, they're not just academic points, are they? They guide the whole thing.
Absolutely. They're interconnected and drive both research and practice. First up is description.
Describing things.
Sounds simple, but it's crucial. Observing and classifying behaviors, like accurately describing the symptoms of depression, fatigue, withdrawal, sadness. Getting that description right is the vital first step to making sure someone gets the right help. Misdiagnose, and you can affect their life for years. It's foundational.
Okay, describe first, then what? If you know what it is.
Then you move to understanding. Why is it happening? Exploring the causes. For depression, that might mean looking at biology, maybe serotonin levels, or cognitive patterns, those negative thought loops, or social factors like intense loneliness.
Gotcha.
Understanding those causes is how we develop therapies that actually target the problem effectively.
And if you understand the causes, can you start to predict things?
That's the third goal, prediction.
Yeah.
Anticipating outcomes. So for depression, again, we know most people recover, but maybe about 10% experience chronic symptoms. Identifying risk factors early on lets us intervene sooner. For your benefit, potentially changing someone's whole life path.
Which leads right into the fourth goal, control. This sounds a bit manipulative.
Yeah, the word control can sound that way. But in psychology, it means applying interventions ethically to improve outcomes. Think therapy, medication, community support programs for depression.
Ah, okay. Improving, not controlling in a negative sense.
Exactly. And the ethical piece is paramount. Always respecting autonomy, getting informed consent. It's about helping people manage symptoms and recover, empowering them.
Okay, that framework makes sense. But even with all this science, there are just so many myths about psychology floating around. What are some big ones we need to bust right now?
Oh, definitely. A huge one is that psychology is only about mental illness.
Right, like it's all about fixing problems.
Exactly. But it's so much broader. Developmental psychology studies how kids learn. Cognitive psychology looks at thinking. Social psychology at group behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Even how people find happiness. It's not just about pathology.
And the idea that it's not a real science, that it's somehow soft.
That's another persistent one. Totally false. Psychology uses controlled experiments, statistical analysis. It's rigorous. It's absolutely not the same as pseudopsychology, like your daily horoscope or those random online personality quizzes. Those lack real evidence.
So my star sign doesn't actually determine my personality? Shocking.
Afraid not. And maybe the biggest myth that
Hmm?
psychologists can read minds.
Yeah, the psychic vibe.
Definitely not. Psychologists make inferences based on observable behavior and scientifically validated tools. They're trained to recognize their own biases, too. No telepathy involved.
What about some specific popular beliefs that research actually shows are wrong?
Okay, how about opposites attract? Popular idea, right?
Sure is.
Well, research consistently shows the opposite, actually. Similarity in values, interests, personality, that's a much better predictor of relationship success.
Huh, okay, what else?
Polygraph tests, lie detectors. People think they're reliable. They're not. Their accuracy is basically chance levels. Why? Because being nervous, anxious, or even just surprised can create the same physiological response as lying.
So they measure arousal, not lies.
Precisely. And the idea we only use 10% of our brains,
Ah, yes, the movie myth.
total myth. Brain imaging, like fMRI, shows we use virtually all of our brain pretty much all the time. Just different parts are more active for different tasks.
Okay, good to know I'm using the whole thing, even if it doesn't always feel like it. What about repressed memories?
That's a tricky one. The idea that people commonly repress traumatic memories and then recover them perfectly in therapy is, well, it's not really supported by solid evidence in the way it's often portrayed in movies. Trauma can make memories hard to access, absolutely, but the Freudian idea of active repression isn't the main mechanism. And crucially, false memories can be unintentionally created or suggested during therapy.
Wow, okay. And learning styles.
Why?
Teaching to visual or auditory learners.
Another really popular idea in education. But again, the scientific evidence just isn't there.
Hmm.
There's no good proof that tailoring teaching to someone's preferred sensory style, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, actually improves learning outcomes. Your brain is pretty good at adapting to information, regardless of how it's presented.
Okay, that's a lot of myths busted. So now that we have a clearer picture of what psychology is and isn't, let's do that quick history tour. How do we get here? From philosophy to labs, where did modern psychology really kick off?
The formal start is usually pegged to Wilhelm Wundt. He set up the very first experimental psychology lab in Leipzig, Germany, back in 1879.
Wundt. And his approach was called structuralism.
Structuralism, yes. His goal was to break down consciousness into its most basic elements, or atoms. He used a method called introspection.
Introspection, looking inward.
Exactly. He'd have people carefully observe and report their own thoughts, feelings, sensations in response to stimuli. Like, what do you experience when you see this color or hear this tone?
How'd that work out?
Well, he did thousands of studies, and crucially, he insisted on replication. But the results were often inconsistent. People's introspections varied a lot. It can highlight individual differences more than universal structures. Still, his emphasis on systematic experiments, foundational for making psychology a science.
Right, but not everyone wanted to just break things down. What happened in America?
Over here, you had William James, often called the father of American psychology. He championed functionalism.
Functionalism, focusing on the function.
Exactly. James wasn't asking what consciousness is made of, but what it does. What's its purpose? How do mental processes help us adapt to our environment? He talked about the stream of consciousness. Thoughts are fluid, continuous, not static elements.
That feels more intuitive somehow.
It led to interesting ideas, like his James Lange theory of emotion. He proposed we don't tremble because we feel afraid. We feel afraid because we notice ourselves trembling. The physical reaction comes first, then the emotion.
Whoa, that's backward from how we usually think about it. Okay, so Wundt, James, and then there's Freud, psychoanalysis. Very different direction.
Radically different. Sigmund Freud focused on the unconscious mind. He believed our behavior was driven by hidden desires, conflicts, and crucially, early childhood experiences. His work with patients, like the famous Anna O, led to the talking cure, the basis of psychotherapy.
Talking things out.
Right. And he proposed models like the id, ego, and superego, constantly battling it out. It completely changed how people thought about personality and motivation.
But his ideas are super controversial, right? Some seem really outdated now.
Oh, absolutely. Many specific theories, like the Oedipus complex or some of his views on things like masturbation or homosexuality, they haven't held up to scientific scrutiny or are ethically problematic by today's standards. Remember, homosexuality was actually listed as a disorder in the main diagnostic manual, the DSM, until 1973.
Wow, 1973. That's not that long ago.
It really isn't. But despite the controversies, Freud's emphasis on unconscious processes and the impact of early life, those ideas were revolutionary and still influence various forms of therapy today, even if not in their original form.
Okay, so after Freud, psychology took another turn, especially in the U.S. behaviorism,
Yeah,
focusing only on what you can see.
exactly. John B. Watson was a key figure. He argued psychology should only study observable behavior. Forget the mind, that black box you can't see.
Just inputs and outputs.
Pretty much. His famous and ethically dubious Little Albert experiment showed you could condition fear. Pair a loud noise with a white rat, and soon the baby fears the rat, and then other furry things too. It demonstrated classical conditioning.
And B.F. Skinner took that further.
Skinner developed operant conditioning,
Yeah.
how consequences, reinforcement, and punishment shape voluntary behavior, making actions more or less likely to happen again.
And he had some pretty wild applications for this, didn't he? Like pigeons guiding bombs.
He did during World War II. Trained pigeons using operant conditioning to peck at targets to guide missiles. It's a stark, maybe unsettling example of behaviorism's principles in action, showing the power of conditioning. Ethically complex, for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so from introspection to behaviorism, eventually the mind came back into focus, right? The cognitive turn.
Yes, exactly. By the mid-20th century, people started realizing you couldn't explain everything, like language or problem solving, just by looking at behavior.
Yeah.
Albert Bandura was key here with his social learning theory.
Learning by watching others.
Right. His Bobo doll experiment was classic. Kids watched adults interact aggressively or gently with the doll. Then, the kids tended to imitate what they saw, especially the aggression, even without any direct reward or punishment.
So we learn vicariously.
Yes. And interestingly, he found kids who saw inconsistent models, sometimes aggressive, sometimes not, were actually the most aggressive. Then you had Edward Tolman, who showed rats in mazes seemed to build cognitive maps. They learned the layout even without rewards, demonstrating latent learning, learning that happens beneath the surface. That work was later linked to the hippocampus in the brain.
The mind making maps.
And Noam Chomsky delivered a major critique of Skinner's purely behavioral view of language. Chomsky argued we must have some innate biological capacity for language, that it couldn't just be learned through reinforcement.
So looking back at all these schools, structuralism, functionalism, psychoanalysis, behaviorism, the cognitive approach, why does this history lesson matter now?
It matters because each perspective, even the ones that seem outdated, offer valuable insights and push the field forward. It shows psychology's evolution from philosophical questions to a more rigorous science, and honestly, many of these different lenses are still useful today. We often use multiple perspectives to understand complex human behavior. It's not about finding the one right theory, but appreciating the different tools we have.
Okay, that sets the stage nicely. Now let's bring it right back to us, to the psychology of you. We experience the world through our senses, but it's not just passive recording, is it? Our brain is actively building our reality.
Absolutely. It's a constant two-way street.
Yeah.
You have sensation. That's the raw data coming in through your eyes, ears, skin, etc. Light waves, sound waves, pressure. Your sensory organs detect this stuff and send signals to the brain.
Okay, the raw input.
Then comes perception. This is where your brain gets involved, organizing, interpreting, and giving meaning to that raw sensory data. It selects what's important, ignores what's not, and constructs your conscious experience of the world.
So my brain is kind of like an editor deciding what makes the cut.
That's a great way to put it. Think about the absolute threshold, the minimum stimulation needed to detect something, like that candle flame 30 miles away, or a watch ticking 20 feet away in perfect quiet.
Right, those classic examples.
But in the real world, it's noisy. Take long-haul truck drivers. They often experience hearing loss over time, not just from the loud engine, but because their brains learn to filter out that constant drone. It's treated as unimportant background noise, even though the sensory input is still there. Their perception adapts.
Wow, the brain just tunes it out. Does this filtering happen even with things we aren't consciously aware of, like subliminal stuff?
Yeah, subliminal perception is real, though maybe not in the way advertisers wish it was. Stimuli below your conscious awareness can be processed by the brain and might subtly influence feelings or thoughts. Your brain is still monitoring the environment. It might filter out the truck engine, but it'll likely perk up if it detects something potentially important, like a siren or a baby's cry, even if it's faint. Perception prioritizes.
Okay, and what about detecting changes in things, the difference threshold?
Right, the just noticeable difference, or J&D. It's the smallest change in a stimulus you can detect. Like, if you're holding 10 pounds, you'll notice adding another pound. But if you're holding 100 pounds, adding 1 pound might be undetectable.
Yeah.
It's often a percentage thing. Weber's law suggests it's about a 5% change for body weight, for example. You wouldn't notice losing 1 pound if you weighed 200, but you'd definitely notice losing 10 pounds.
Our brains are incredibly flexible, too. I remember reading about that crazy inverted vision experiment. People wore goggles that flipped everything upside down.
Oh, yeah. That's a fantastic demo of brain plasticity, your brain's amazing ability to adapt. After a few days of wearing those prism goggles, people's brains actually adjusted. The world started to look normal again, even though the input was still flipped.
The brain just rewires itself.
In a sense,
Wow.
yes. It adapts perception to make sense of the input. It's incredible.
And then there are Gestalt principles, how we see patterns and holes, like that optical illusion with the young woman and the old woman in the same picture.
Exactly. Gestalt psychology highlighted how our brains are wired to organize sensory information into meaningful wholes or patterns. We don't just see random dots, we see shapes, objects. The whole is different from the sum of its parts. What you perceive in ambiguous figures, like the old young woman, can depend on your expectations or what you focus on.
And these principles get used, right? Like in marketing.
All the time. Design, advertising, even fashion uses Gestalt principles to guide your eye, create impressions, influence how you perceive products or even body shapes. It's about managing perception.
It really feels like our brain is working ahead of us sometimes. Like we react emotionally before we even know why.
That's preconscious processing. Some sensory pathways, especially for potential threats, take a shortcut. Information goes straight to the limbic system, your brain's emotional hub, before it's fully processed by the visual cortex, your conscious awareness.
The fast track for danger.
Exactly. It allows you to recoil from a snake before you consciously think, oh, that's a snake. Emotion often gets a head start on reason. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Okay, this perception stuff is fascinating. Let's shift to how we actually hold on to information. Memory and learning. The computer analogy often comes up here, right?
It's a useful starting point. We talk about 3 basic processes. Encoding is getting information into the system, like typing on a keyboard. Storage is holding onto it, like saving to RAM, short-term or working memory, or the hard drive, long-term memory. And retrieval is getting it back out when you need it.
Makes sense. But we don't encode everything the same way, do we? Like remembering lunch versus studying for a test.
Right, that's automatic versus effortful encoding. What you had for lunch might get encoded automatically with a little conscious effort. Studying for an exam requires effortful encoding. You have to pay attention, concentrate, work at it.
And attention is key. But we're not great at multitasking, are we?
Not really, no. What we call multitasking is usually just rapid task switching. Shifting your attention back and forth quickly. And every switch has a cost. It actually makes you less efficient and more prone to errors.
The invisible gorilla experiment really drives that home.
Oh yeah, classic demonstration of selective attention. People are asked to count basketball passes in a video. They focus so hard on that, many completely fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking right through the middle of the scene.
It's unbelievable you think you'd see a gorilla.
It shows just how much we filter out when our attention is focused elsewhere. Our attentional capacity is limited.
So, given these limits, how can we learn and remember things more effectively? Just rereading notes isn't the best way.
Definitely not. That involves levels of processing. Rereading or highlighting is shallow processing. It doesn't stick very well. Deep processing is much more effective.
Deep processing, what's that involve?
It means engaging with the meaning of the information, analyzing it, thinking about it, connecting it to things you already know, or making it personally relevant. That creates stronger memory traces.
So instead of just highlighting operant conditioning.
Exactly. Think about how it applies to your own life. Maybe how you trained your dog, or how your parents disciplined you, or a habit you're trying to change. That's called elaborative encoding, linking new information to your existing knowledge and experiences. That makes it much more memorable.
Connected to yourself. Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears again to something deeply human. Connection. Specifically, loneliness and love. Loneliness. It's more than just being alone, right?
Oh, much more. It's a really complex motivational state. Psychologists sometimes call it a thwarting of belonging. It's not about the objective number of people around you, it's the subjective feeling of disconnection.
So you can feel lonely in a crowd.
Absolutely. And we distinguish between social loneliness, lacking a sense of group belonging, like maybe that veteran returning home feels cut off from their unit, and emotional loneliness, lacking a deep, intimate bonds with another person, like maybe that student feeling isolated at a new university far from their community.
And the physical impact is startling. It actually hurts.
It really does seem to. Neuroimaging studies using fMRI show that experiencing social rejection or loneliness activates some of the same brain regions that process physical pain, specifically areas like the anterior cingulate cortex.
So heartbreak is kind of literal then.
The brain seems to register in a similar way, yeah. And get this. Studies have even found that taking acetaminophen Tylenol can actually reduce the feelings of social pain from rejection.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. And this isn't just an individual feeling, it's a public health issue now.
A major one. Chronic loneliness has been linked to significantly worse health outcomes. Its impact on mortality risk is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's a stronger predictor than obesity or physical inactivity.
15 cigarettes a day, that's huge.
It is. It's why some places, like the UK, have even appointed a minister for loneliness. They recognize it's a widespread societal problem needing intervention. Connection is fundamental.
Okay, now for the flip side of connection, love. You mentioned earlier it's not just an emotion, but a biological drive.
That's how the research is framing it now, yeah. Brain scans of people intensely in love show activation in the reward system areas, like the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and the caudate nucleus, which are rich in dopamine.
The feel-good chemical.
Right. These are the same systems involved in basic drives, like hunger and thirst. It helps explain why romantic love can feel so compelling, so essential, and why breakups can be so devastating. It feels like a basic need isn't being met.
Like going without food or water. And this love thing, it changes over time, doesn't it? There are phases.
Definitely. We often talk about two main phases. First is limerence. That's the passionate, head-over-heels infatuation stage.
The exciting bit.
Yeah. Characterized by intense longing, obsessive thoughts, euphoria. Chemically, your brain is flooded with PEA phenylethylamine, which acts like a natural amphetamine plus lots of dopamine. It creates those highs, but also anxiety, jealousy, fear of rejection. This intense phase usually lasts maybe 18 months to 3 years.
Only 3 years. Then what? Does it just fade?
It doesn't fade so much as it evolves. It transitions into companionate love. This is a calmer, more stable phase built on intimacy, trust, and deep affection. The brain chemistry shifts, less of the amphetamine-like stuff, more oxytocin and vasopressin, which are associated with bonding and long-term attachment.
The cuddle hormone.
Exactly. Now, this shift is natural and important for long-term relationships, but interestingly, a lot of divorces happen around the 4 to 6 year mark.
Right when that chemical shift happens.
Precisely. If couples mistake that natural decrease in frantic intensity for falling out of love, they might end things prematurely. Understanding this transition is key. It's not loss, it's evolution into a deeper bond.
So it's crucial not to chase that initial high forever. What does predict long-term love then? The companionate kind.
Research points strongly to a few key things. One is emotional security, feeling safe enough to be vulnerable, communicate openly, handle conflict constructively. Another is being best friends, genuinely liking each other, sharing interests, making time to connect. And the third is effective role formation, navigating responsibilities, supporting each other's goals, functioning well as a team.
Security, friendship, teamwork. Got it. Okay, let's broaden out again to social influence, how groups and situations shape us, that classic debate. Is it the person or the situation?
The dispositional versus situational attribution question. Yeah, it's huge in social psychology. And some of the classic experiments are really quite chilling.
Like Milgram's obedience study.
Exactly. Stanley Milgram's experiments in the 60s. Ordinary people were told by an authority figure, a researcher in a lab coat, to administer increasingly strong electric shocks to another person, a learner, whenever they made a mistake on a memory test.
The learner wasn't actually getting shocked.
No, they were actors pretending. But the participant believed they were inflicting real pain. And the results were stunning. 65%, nearly two-thirds of participants, went all the way to the maximum voltage, labeled XXX, just because the authority figure told them the experiment requires that you continue.
That's terrifying. Ordinary people.
It powerfully showed how strong the pressure to obey authority can be, even overriding someone's own conscience. The situation had immense power.
And this isn't just a lab thing. There are real-world examples.
Sadly, yes. The Hoffling Hospital experiment, where nurses were instructed over the phone by an unknown doctor to give an obviously excessive dose of an unauthorized drug. 21 out of 22 nurses started to comply before being stopped. Or more recently, those bizarre strip search scams, where someone calls a fast food restaurant, pretends to be police, and convinces the manager to detain and strip search an employee based on flimsy accusations.
How does that even happen?
It often involves gradual escalation, diffusion of responsibility, and the perceived legitimacy of authority, just like in Milgram's study. It shows how easily situations can make good people do harmful things.
And group dynamics themselves can be toxic too, not just authority.
Absolutely. Think about Jane Elliott's blue eyes, brown eyes exercise she did with her third-grade class after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated.
Right, she divided them by eye color.
Yes. On day one, blue-eyed kids were told they were superior, given privileges. Brown-eyed kids were inferior, wore collars. The superior kids quickly became arrogant and discriminatory. The inferior kids became timid and performed worse academically. Then she reversed it the next day, and the roles flipped just as quickly. It showed how easily prejudice can be created by arbitrary group distinctions and social roles.
And the Stanford prison experiment, similar idea.
Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment is another landmark, though controversial, study. College students randomly assigned roles as prisoners or guards in a simulated prison. Within days, the guards became increasingly authoritarian, some even abusive. The prisoners became passive and distressed. The experiment had to be stopped early. It dramatically illustrated how powerfully roles and situations can shape behavior, sometimes overwhelming individual personality.
The power of the situation again. And then there's the bystander effect, like with Kitty Genovese.
Exactly. The tragic case of Kitty Genovese, attacked and murdered in New York, where dozens of people supposedly heard or saw something but didn't intervene effectively. It highlighted diffusion of responsibility. When others are present, people feel less personal obligation to help, assuming someone else will. And related is de-individuation, losing your sense of individual identity in a large group or crowd, which can lead to impulsive or antisocial behavior you would normally do.
Being anonymous in the crowd?
Right. And it's not just about overt prejudice either. Even subtle things matter. The Shell studies showed that people who scored low on prejudice tests still acted in discriminatory ways if they were cognitively busy or distracted. It suggests that being fair and non-prejudiced requires active effort and attention. It's not just the default state.
Wow. Okay, our last area for this deep dive. Mental health versus mental illness. You used a physical health analogy earlier, which I thought was helpful.
Yeah, I find it clarifies things. Think about physical health. You could have poor health habits. Maybe you eat junk food, don't sleep well, never exercise. That's not ideal, right? It makes you more vulnerable to getting sick. But it doesn't automatically mean you have a diagnosed disease like diabetes or heart disease.
Okay, poor habits versus actual illness.
Exactly. Similarly, with mental health, you can have periods of poor mental health. Maybe you're stressed, isolated, thinking negatively, not coping well. These are like poor mental health habits. They increase your vulnerability, your risk for developing a mental illness like depression or an anxiety disorder. But poor mental health and mental illness are not the same thing. You can have poor mental health without a diagnosis.
That's a really important distinction, especially given how mental illness gets blamed for things like violence.
It's crucial. The vast majority of people with diagnosed mental illnesses are not violent. In fact, they're more likely to be victims of violence. When we look at tragic events like mass shootings, perpetrators often show signs of poor mental health, like extreme isolation, anger, rejection sensitivity, but not necessarily a diagnosable clinical disorder that caused the violence. Blaming mental illness directly is often inaccurate and hugely stigmatizing.
And that stigma is a massive barrier, isn't it? Makes it a family secret.
It absolutely does. The shame and secrecy surrounding mental illness prevents so many people from seeking help, which just prolongs suffering. We need to talk about it more openly, like any other health issue.
And it's worth remembering that how we define illness can change, right? It's culturally influenced.
Definitely. Diagnosis isn't always purely objective science. We mentioned homosexuality being removed from the DSM in 1973 that was driven by changing social attitudes and activism, not just new data. Or look at ADHD diagnoses. The rates are vastly different across countries. The U.S. has some of the highest rates. France has among the
That's
lowest.
such a difference.
While the French approach often looks more at underlying psychosocial factors, first family dynamics, social context, before jumping to a medical diagnosis and medication. They take a more systems-based view. And even within the U.S., there's evidence suggesting diagnosis can be influenced by context. For example, kids born in August or September, who are typically the youngest in their kindergarten class, they are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than their slightly older classmates.
Mhm.
It raises questions about whether we're sometimes labeling developmental immaturity as a disorder. It just highlights how complex diagnosis is and how much culture and context play a role.
That's a really powerful point. It feels like this whole dive has shown just how complex and interconnected everything is. Our brains, our minds, our relationships, our societies.
Absolutely. From the building blocks of perception and memory, to the deep drives of love and connection, to the powerful influence of situations and culture, psychology offers this incredibly rich, sometimes surprising lens on what makes us human. Hopefully, this has been a useful shortcut through some of that complexity.
It definitely has. Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Given everything we've talked about, how deeply our environment, our culture, our social connections shape everything from how we remember things to how we feel, even our basic health, consider this. How might consciously choosing your environment, the situations you put yourself in, and the community you build around you, how might that actively impact your own sense of well being, your identity, and maybe even reshape your future? Something to think about.